Welcome to the Unlocked podcast, hosted by me, Julia Myron.
Hi, welcome to the Unlocked podcast. It's me, Julia Myron, and I am on a quest to understand the world and how to make it better, one conversation at a time. Each episode, I speak with thinkers, change makers, and visionaries who help us unlock deeper insights about life, justice, science, and the human experience. Today on the show, we're unlocking women in leadership with none other than Dr. Lois Frankel. You may know her from her critically acclaimed book, Nice Girls Do Not Get the Corner Office. And in case you thought that changed, she released an updated version called Nice Girls Still Do Not Get the Corner Office. But to be honest, this is one of my favorite books, and it has practical and action oriented strategies to help women transform their careers. Dr. Franco has nearly 4 decades of experience as an executive coach and author. With a background in counseling, psychology, and a passion for driving leadership development, she has become a trusted voice on career advancement and success strategies for women. I can't wait to speak to this powerhouse. But before we get into that, I would like you guys to please subscribe to this channel for the opportunity to listen, as I'm going to have many exciting guests and I need your support so I can get them on this podcast so we can all learn from them, one conversation at a time, as I said. So let's dive in. So good morning, Dr. Franco. How are you?
I'm good, Julia. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on your podcast.
A pleasure to have you. I've already done your introduction, but I was just telling you backstage that you are you have impacted my life, and I know a lot of people have been moved by your book, Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. So I just know that by the end of this conversation, a lot of people are gonna just have a lot to take away from it. So I would like to start by saying, as I was saying, you have helped a lot of women to find your voice. And we live in a society where there are still people who believe that women cannot be leaders because inherently we're not meant to be leaders. They believe that men are inherently meant to be leaders. But you have worked with women who maybe did not start off so confident in themselves as leaders, but became leaders in their industry. So can you speak to the notion that leadership is inherent, or do you think leadership can be taught based on your experience working with
Oh,
aspiring leaders?
yeah, it's a great question. And I definitely think leadership can be learned.
Okay.
Um, I don't think people pop out of the womb as leaders.
Hmm.
Do we have certain characteristics or traits that may lend itself? Certainly. And so it may be easier for some people to lead, but it doesn't mean that for the people who it doesn't come naturally, you can't learn to do it. And that's really how I spent quite a bit of my career, was helping both men and women understand the fundamentals of leadership, which is really just the fundamentals of building strong relationships with people and showing that you care about them. And that's where women come in, because
Hmm.
too many people confuse leadership and management, right? You manage a process, but you can't manage people. People will only be led. And
Hmm.
women make great leaders because of their ability to show people they care, to be inclusive, to aim for collaboration. I always say women lead all the time. They just don't call themselves leaders.
Hmm. It's that audacity of saying I am a leader, which I've come to learn. My sister would be like, "You're a thought leader," and I'm like, "Oh, that leadership word is almost like we're scared of it." But you said something interesting. There's a difference between managing people and leadership. Can you just expand on that a little further?
Yeah, and a lot of this comes from the work of John Cotter. He's a Harvard professor, and I really admire him, and he's let me use his work in some of my work. And what he says is that you manage the process. So, for example, you have to hire, you have to staff, you have to set agenda, you have to set goals. You may need to implement systems that are going to work for you. And you have to produce predictable results. That's management, but that's not leadership.
Mm,
Leadership is having a vision, aligning people behind the vision, inspiring people to achieve the vision through
mm,
positive reinforcement and feedback and inspiring people. And leadership doesn't just produce definable results. Leadership produces change and knowing when change is needed, because we've
mm,
seen strong leaders in corporate. I'm sorry, let me correct that. We've seen strong managers in organizations, and they tend to maintain status quo. They're great at maintaining status quo, but when change is needed, they don't often shift because they don't have the vision. They're not able to engage people to come up with a new and different way of doing things and creating change that is essential for organization success.
mm. That's excellent. I love that. I One thing I loved is when you said inspiring, because leaders inspire, and you push people to almost become something that they don't know that they can become. So leaders are in some way, yes, please go on.
No, you said you push people. And I just want to correct that because I don't
Yeah.
think leaders push. I think
Okay.
leaders enable. They bring out the best in people. They identify what their strengths are. They value those strengths. And so, excuse me, but the word push somehow just had a connotation for me that I thought, oh, I don't want people to think leaders push, but
Mm,
they really enable and facilitate. And, the
okay.
word facilitate, Julia, means to make easy, right? And that's what
Mm,
leaders do. They make it easy for you to do your job.
mm. So they don't micromanage.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. They make it easy. But isn't that harder to identify somebody's strength because it takes knowing them on a peculiar level to be able to identify that? Do you find it challenging for the leaders you work with? How do you help them identify the strengths of their team members or the people working with them?
Yeah, well, first of all, you have to let go of your own agenda, right? And what you're
Mhm.
strong at. So, I happen to be strong in people skills. And if that's my only hammer, then everything's a nail when it comes to people, right? And so you have to let go of your own and say, okay, so what are some other strengths that people have that may complement my own that I don't see right away? And so, for example, I know when I would hire staff members, I would always look for complementarity. So if I know my strength is people, but it's not necessarily details, then I'd
Mm,
hire people who were detail oriented and I'd
yes.
really let them take the ball and run with that. But at the same time, my job was to help them develop people skills too, right? Now,
Mm,
one way to do that, Julia, and this is something that I've used with leaders for many years, is the Myers Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI. And so I would use it with teams of people. And the Myers Briggs is a preference indicator, and it helps people identify what their strengths are and their preferences are, from how they look at the world, how they like to work, what they like to pay attention to, how they prefer to live their lives, whether orderly and planned or more spontaneous. And when you put all of the types together in the Myers Briggs, there's 16 types, very clear strengths and preferences emerge. And on the best team, you're going to have a combination of those 16 profiles.
mm,
Too often, leaders hire people that are exactly like them. So you get
mm,
one or two of the profiles, but that's not helpful because teams really thrive on diversity.
mm. Thank you for sharing that. I want to go back to women in leadership because that's a particular. Obviously, I'm a woman, so that appeals more to me. And I just, in a few years, I've launched myself into the professional world, and I have, it has smacked me in the face. I was totally unprepared for it, but I really want to talk about shame and women, and how, for example, in my circumstance, whenever I walk into a place and I am commanding a room, or I express my desires to be a leader, to go up the ladder, or even sometimes to my friends, I'm immediately met by, oh, okay. Because at the back of their mind, especially as an ethnic woman, as I am of Nigerian descent, and you find that in many ethnic backgrounds where you are raised to desire more than anything to be a wife and a mother. You're not really so putting your work as number one and coming into work as I'm here to work because I want to go as high as I can. It's not necessarily applauded in some spaces. So I want you to speak on this with your experience on working with diverse women, and you speak about it in your books. In what way can we deprogram ourselves from caring about what society says about us, and how can we do that in your experience?
Yeah, I think that's really what Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office is all about. Because people think that the book is going to be about you can't be nice and be successful. But what the book, because you've read it and what you know, is that the book is really saying you can't be the nice little girl you were taught to be in childhood and expect
Yes.
to achieve your adult goals. That women are still socialized to some degree. And you bring up an important point about culture, because in different cultures, it's different. I think
Mhm.
here in the American culture, it's starting to shift, particularly in the Caucasian women culture. Um,
Mhm.
that little girls are getting messages that you can be whatever you want, you can do whatever you want. But if you look, for example, in the Latina culture, right, in the United States, they still get messages about it's important to get married and be nice, and there are stereotypes there. And it's interesting that you bring up growing up in Nigeria, because just yesterday I was talking to a woman in Zimbabwe, and she's bringing me over to do a conference in August in Zimbabwe.
Mhm.
And I asked her, what are the key challenges for women in Zimbabwe? And she said exactly what you said. It's
Yeah.
women in Zimbabwe are still getting this message that they should be mothers and acquiesce to men and let men be in charge. So I think, to answer your question about what do we do about that, we have to take a look at the messages we got and
Mm.
really do a deep dive into, are they true in 2025 and beyond? Because
Mm.
too many people get stuck in the past. And if you're getting those kinds of messages, whether it's from your parents, whether it's at school, in your workplace, from your significant other, you need to really develop a counter message that is consistent with what you want. And I think that that's hard for women who are in that situation to come up with, what do they really want. And so I ask women to do an exercise to tell me, if you had a magic wand 12 months from now, what would you be doing? Not 5 years from now, not 10 years from
Mm.
now, just a year from now. What would you be doing? What would you love to do? And start having that conversation with yourself and with others. And then
Mm.
once you identify that thing you'd love to do, you're going to need to prepare for pushback. You're going to need to prepare that, hey, look, just because you want it doesn't mean everybody around you wants it for you. And
Mhm.
you need to see that resistance as something that you can't acquiesce to. You
Mm.
can't say, oh, because they don't want it for me, I shouldn't want it for me. That's not okay. This is your
Mhm.
life. You get one life. Some people think you may get more and come back, or you've already come back. But, my feeling is you get one life, and you need to define that life in the way that you think is best for you. The
Mhm.
existential, the existential psychologists, and I studied existential psychology, they say that our life is all about choices. And that's our life responsibility, is to make choices and to create plans for implementing those choices. So one other thing that I'd add to that is that surround yourself with people who are doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
Get
That's
inspiration from them.
yeah. And sometimes I'm gonna be honest, it may be it may be fictional characters. I've looked at some fictional characters and I'm like, I know this is fiction, but I know there's somebody there who is doing this work that I want to do. I look at them, it may be somebody who you maybe don't have a closeness to, but you follow them, and not to go into parasocial relations, but you just see like, okay, if it's possible for that person to be everything and they are from where I come from, they're doing what I do, if it's possible for them, then I just need to understand that it's possible for me. But it may take much more work than maybe your contemporaries, because you have to, the hard work of breaking thought process and going against the grain, that is tough for a lot of people to do.
And you're 100% right. And that's especially true for women of color. And it doesn't
Yeah,
matter what country you live in.
yeah.
Um, every workplace is a playing field, right? It has rules, it has boundaries, it has strategies. Every workplace is a playing field. And the boundaries change on the playing field for different groups of people. So, for example, when it comes to being verbal and expressive, the
Mhm.
playing field for men is very wide. They can say whatever they want, and they're not going to get penalized in any way. For Caucasian women, it comes in. I can't get
Mhm.
away with saying what my male counterparts say because I'm going to get called a bitch. I'm going to get called pushy. I'm going to get called names.
Okay.
And then when it comes to women of color, it comes in even further. Because when someone like you says something that's direct, straightforward, confident, you get labeled an angry black woman, right?
Mhm.
When nothing is further from the truth. And
Mhm.
so again, we need to be looking at those stereotypes and not acquiesce or succumb to them and understand that they are just that. They are stereotypes and they don't necessarily, they do not define who you are. You can't let them define who you are. And that's why I think it's really important to find other people like you and associate with them and find out what are their best practices for overcoming those stereotypes.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And then in your book, you talk about how when women get into male dominated spaces, I mean, there are two options you talk about in your book. They either start to take on male characteristics and kind of shun what makes them unique as a woman. And then there's also the other side where they lean too much into their feminine characteristics. And I was reading your book and you talk about how they may decorate their office overly overly
Feminine.
feminine. Right. Yes.
Mhm.
So I want you to expand on that. In what ways can emphasizing our femininity be a strength and weakness in getting our career goals? And how do we do it in a strategic and practical way?
Yeah, well, not to plug my book, but I did write a book that was called See Jane Lead. And it is a blueprint for how women can embrace their femininity and lead effectively. Because what I say is that in order to be an effective leader, you have to be a leader for your time. You
Hmm.
could not take, for example, a great military leader like MacArthur, right? And you couldn't plop him down in the middle of the military today and have him be successful. He would not be successful because the
Hmm.
values of today's military are different than the values of 75 years ago. So, what I believe is that this generation calls for feminine leadership. As a matter of fact, I've labeled it the feminization of leadership. That
Hmm.
followers, the people who report to you, or that you are responsible for influencing, followers want what women offer. And I go back to, I said a little bit earlier, collaboration, positive reinforcement, making you feel important, listening to you. Those are all critical to successful leadership in this generation. And that's what we bring to the table. And we don't have to be apologetic about it because it's what works. When I coach men, and I don't do that much coaching anymore, but when I did, men used to say to me, "Oh, you're here to teach me the soft skills." And I
Hmm.
used to look at them and say, if they're so soft, what makes them hard for you? Right?
Hmm.
because that's what they typically were referred to as soft skills, but they're not. They're the skills that are essential for leadership so that women can embrace their femininity. Now, you can't act like that nice little girl you were taught to be in childhood. That's not going to work. You can't
Mm-hmm.
sit there quietly with your mouth shut and, be polite and be nice and always be kind. You have to add new behaviors to your repertoire. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's what Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office is all about. Because what it says is that, yes, nice is necessary for success, it's not sufficient. So,
Mm.
how do you say things in a way that people will hear you, but they won't find you masculine? and and again, I feel like I'm pushing my books, but and I'm not trying to do that, but what I'm thinking
Please
is,
do, please do. That's why you are a wealth of knowledge. We want to learn, so please push your book.
well, thank you, because this question really gets answered in my audiobook, Nice Girls Don't Speak Up and Stand Out. And I
Mm,
did that as an audiobook, not a, a paper book, because people have to hear, women have to hear, what does it sound like when I am being assertive in a feminine way? Okay.
mhm,
So that book is filled with tips for how are you going to be assertive and not lose your femininity. I
mm.
talk about in the book that, the challenge for women is that we need to learn to tell people to go to hell in a way that they look forward to the trip.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Yes. Yes, I hear that because to be honest, it's I love everything that makes me a woman, and I do not think it's a disadvantage. And I heard recently, I was listening to Justin Baldoni. He has a podcast, and he was talking to somebody and he said, "What makes a good person? Now, man or woman? What do you think makes a good person?" And I'm paraphrasing, but the person went on to say, "Oh, the person must be kind. The person must be attentive. The person must be compassionate. The person must be," and he was like, "Do you realize that all those qualities you've listed are qualities that are in women, but when it's in a woman, you tell that woman she's being a woman, it's weak. So why do you think that you having those qualities?" He said, "Would you like a fellow worker who is a man to have those qualities?" He was like, "Absolutely." So why would you think those qualities itself are bad? But it goes back to what we are talking about. It's the way society has fed us a lie that these things make us weak. But your ability to collaborate, and I know working with women, which is my bias, sometimes it's like they don't want all the credit. Some of them, they want, like, let's share the credit, let's do a teamwork. And then I find that when I'm on a team with a man, it's almost, I'm going to tell you what to do and here you go. There's no collaboration. And I'm not saying that's just a personality that he may have gotten because it is how he was raised in a professional setting. So I just want to say, like, just my goal now, even as a woman in a professional work environment, in a profession, is try your best to be a good person and put your best foot forward and try to all those characteristics. Obviously you can't be weeping with somebody in a meeting. You have to, there's a time and place for everything, but everything that makes you a woman, your compassion, your intuition, those are your strengths as well. So there is no need to try to be anything else than what you are.
Exactly. You have to live your values. You have to be authentic. Be
Yes.
authentically you, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I also wanted to ask, what are your tips if there is a mother who's watching, or a girl, because sometimes as girls or women, we need to raise ourselves. So we need to re-raise ourselves. Or someone who's about to be a mother, how do we start to create a society and raise women who are confident in themselves as leaders?
Yeah, there's a couple things that we could do. First of all, is to honor who your child is.
Mm,
Confidence comes from being able to play to your strengths. So I had mentioned the Myers Briggs before. There's a book that's called Nurture by Nature.
mm,
Okay. The author is Tiger and Tiger, Tieger, and I think his wife Tiger, Tieger, but it's called Nurture by Nature. And the book says that when we identify a child's strengths,
mm,
and we let the child play to those strengths, not to our expectations, to those
Mm,
strengths, they will develop self confidence because
mm,
otherwise they're going to doubt themselves. And I like to give the example of, I was always a very shy child. I actually still am somewhat shy. People don't believe it, but I am. And I mean, I could be on the stage, but that's a public persona. In person, I'm kind
yeah.
of shy. But my mother was very outgoing, and she
Mm,
always pushed me into situations where I had to be outgoing, and I always felt like a fraud. Okay.
mm,
Because I knew that wasn't me. And so it wasn't playing to my strengths. And I think that led to a lack of self confidence initially. So that's number one, identify your children's strengths. Number two, create opportunities for them to excel. So
mm,
get them out of their comfort zones. Take them to places, whether it's museums or places where you create crafts or whatever, and let them do whatever they want to do within a realm of safety. Of course, you want your child to be safe, but within a realm of safety, let your child explore and make mistakes, and don't punish mistakes, but rather use them as learning opportunities. I think that would be great. Another
mm,
thing is, I tell mothers to put your daughters into sports. In some cultures, girls are starting to play more sports, not in all of them. S- Being in a sport, both individual and team, um, develops another kind of confidence. Or
mm,
you could enroll your child like in a self-defense class, right? But being physically capable lends to being mentally capable, right?
mm,
And so I think, and again, depending on your child's proclivities, your child might not want to play tennis or soccer, but there might be something else they like to do physically. And so find opportunities for that. And then the last thing that I would say is teach your child about money,
yes.
because in some ways money is power, isn't it?
Yeah.
And from an early
Completely.
age, give your daughter an allowance. Teach her about saving, spending, and giving to others, right?
Hmm.
They actually make these they're piggy banks, and they have
Yeah.
different slots in them. Have you seen those, Julia?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have slots, and it says save, spend, give, and I
Yeah.
forget what the fourth one, invest.
Invest. Yes.
And so teach your child about that. When you go to a restaurant, let your daughter order for herself.
Yeah.
You may have to
Absolutely.
read the menu to her, but say, okay, what would you like to try today? When
Mm,
the bill comes, show her the bill, show her how you
mm,
pay a bill. So
mm,
every step of the way, let it be a learning experience.
mm. And exactly what you said, that is the difference. Because I feel like more often than not, women are taught things of leading a home, but not things on how to be successful in life. And men are taught things on how to be successful in life, like paying a bill, because they're like, oh, you're going to have to take care of a family, but not how to be successful in personal relationships that has nothing to do with the career. So I think there's a balance that we need. You need to be successful and be able to take care of your home, whether you choose to marry or not. But you need to, as a woman, to be able to be successful in life. And I find it so difficult when some of my friends, I try to have conversation with them about money and like, are you investing? Do you know how to do this? Do you know how to do that? And they recoil, not because it's just uncomfortable for them. Period. They we still have that thing where it's like, oh, my husband will take care of it, or I will find somebody to take care of it. It's like, no, you have to be a capable human being. But on the subject of money, there's so it's negotiating your salary is a huge thing. What are some of the mistakes that women make when it comes to negotiating their salary?
Yeah, the first one is not doing research and finding out what the position is worth. It's not what
Mm,
you are worth, it's what the position is worth in the marketplace.
Mm.
So you need to do research so that when you start negotiating, you can go in with a range. So for example, if you're applying for a job and they say, well, what salary are you looking for? You can say something like, well, my research shows that this position with these responsibilities pays anywhere between 75,000 and 95,000 a year. And I believe with my experience, I should probably be towards the $95,000 end.
Mm.
That's how you use that information. Okay, so that's
Wow.
number one. Number two, research shows that women don't negotiate up front because they think, well, let me just get the job and prove that I can do it. And
Mm.
then I can ask for more money. No, it's too late then because you're already behind the eight ball. Again, the research
Mm.
shows that women start behind in their first jobs because they don't negotiate well enough. So
Mm.
there's that. And then the third mistake that women make is fear that they're going to um, damage a relationship sometimes before it started. So it might be
Mhm.
you're negotiating for a raise where you already work, or it may be that you're negotiating for a new job. And women will tend to hesitate because they don't want to offend anybody. But
Mm.
there's a technique that you can use for this, which is called contrasting. And
Mm.
contrasting is what you do want and what you don't want. So, for example, I might say, I don't want you to think that I don't want this job because I
Mm.
most assuredly do. At the same time, I don't want you to think that I'm being greedy when I suggest that I get paid towards the high end of the scale because
Mm.
that's what I think that because I think I bring to the table the things that warrant that.
Mm.
And given that opportunity, I will show you that I'll earn that for you. That's how you do it. I mean, that's how you mitigate any feelings that, well, boy, isn't she pushy? You just put it
Yeah.
on the table. I don't want you to think that I'm being greedy or that, I don't want this job because I certainly do. At the same time, I want us both to be delighted so that when
Mm.
I come in, I hit the floor running and you'll see the value I add. But don't wait to ask for money until you're on the job. It's too late.
Yeah. That's already the tools you just said, contrasting and saying, researching and saying, this is the range, and based on my experience, this is where I should be. That is it. I love that. I love that.
Mhm.
So now we're coming towards the end of our conversation, sadly, but I usually have people research questions that people want to know. And when I have the opportunity, so maybe sometimes in my comment section, or when I see an expert that it aligns with, I'll ask the question. So our to ask an expert question for today is, for women, would you recommend faking it until you make it?
You know, I don't like the phrase fake it till you make it because it seems inauthentic. But I agree with the premise
Okay.
that we need to do things that don't feel natural to us and to take a risk and to not assume that everybody's going to know that I'm not really qualified for this.
Hmm.
That's a place where I think guys do much better than we do. Where if there's a job available that they're not 100% qualified for, they'll apply because they'll say, I'm smart, I can learn it, right?
Yeah.
They don't see it as faking it till they make it. They see it
Hmm.
as self-confident. And I'd like to see women be more like that. And again, my problem with the phrase is faking seems inauthentic. But I do think that we need to get out of our comfort zone and do. Eleanor Roosevelt said, we must do the things we think we cannot do, right?
Hmm.
That's really what creates change. We must do the things we think we cannot do. And I think that you'll be surprised at what the outcomes are sometimes, especially if you get some help and guidance along the way. Did I answer
Yeah.
that question?
Absolutely, absolutely, because it's a thing of imposter syndrome, right? That makes you feel like I'm faking it, but you're not faking it, because I was listening to another interview by the Red Lobster, just got a new CEO, and he came on Breakfast Club and he was talking about his experience. He's a black man, about getting into finance, and his family is not from a financial background, but he went to school with all these people who have legacy in finance. Their fathers are, stock, they know it very well, but he did not. But he went in, he applied for an internship at a huge financial firm, and he spent all nights researching. And the interviewer said, "So you faked it till you make it?" I said, "No, I did not fake it till I make it. I researched, I learned, and I went there and I said what I wanted, and I got the job." And it's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, for me, I would have said imposter syndrome, but it's like you learned it, you said what you learned, and you got the job. And that, obviously, now he's the CEO of Red Lobster. So that worked
Oh,
for him. And that attitude,
I, I know. I love that. And I'm glad that you brought up imposter syndrome because just yesterday I learned about a book that I hadn't heard before because I'm working on a 20-year update to Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office, and it'll be out next year. And
Wow,
it,
okay.
and in that book, I'm talking about things that 20 years ago weren't even on the table, like,
Hmm.
hybrid working and all kinds of things. And so one of the things I talk about that I did not talk about initially was imposter syndrome, because my belief is that there's no such thing as imposter
Hmm.
syndrome, that it makes it sound like it's a disease. Right? I have
Hmm.
imposter syndrome. I have this disease. And so I want women not to think about that. So anyway, somebody told me about a book. I think it's called Imposter No More
Hmm.
or No More Imposter. It's one or the other. It's by Dr. Jill Stoddard, Stoddard. And she shifts it. And I love how she did this. I just posted on LinkedIn about it just yesterday. She shifts from imposter syndrome to imposterization.
Hmm.
That what happens in our society is that we compare ourselves so much to other people that we
Hmm.
wind up feeling like an imposter, right? And that you have to break that. You have to break this comparison because you are who you are and you are where you are. And just as you described, this CEO, crammed at night and learned all these things. And that wasn't being an imposter, that was being smart.
Exactly. So I love that. Thank you so much for also speaking on imposter syndrome. We've come to the end of our conversation. I have one last question. The podcast is about my quest to understand the world, but it's also about my quest to find out how we can make this world better. So, based on your experience, how would the world be a better place with more female leaders? And if more women are empowered to be leaders?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I look around the world and I see a world where there is war, famine, greed, disease. Right, the world doesn't look good right now, and from
Yeah.
no matter which place you're looking at it. And I also look at a world that doesn't have enough women in leadership roles. And the way that women would make this world better is by leading more organizations at the local level, companies, governments, countries, because we don't make better leaders than men, we make different leaders than men. And
Hmm.
what this world needs today are all the things we've just talked about in terms of women in leadership. It needs more understanding. It needs more listening and less muscle, right?
Hmm.
Less posturing and more collaboration and cooperation and saying positive things, not always the negative. And so this world would certainly be better with more women in leadership roles because of the skills and the temperaments that, and I don't want to generalize and I don't want to stereotype, but that
Hmm.
that women typically would bring.
And with that, we're come to the end of our conversation. I would like to thank you, Dr. Frankel, for coming on my podcast. I hope you guys have learned so much, because I have certainly learned a lot from this conversation. You can find Dr. Frankel on her website. Everything about her will be in the link in the description below. Please check her out. We're fingers crossed for her next update to her books. Nice Girls Don't Get Corner Office next year, 20-year update. But we also want you to check out her book, Nice Girls Don't Get a Corner Office. And also, I love the title of this one, by the way, Nice Girls Still Don't Get a Corner Office. So just in case you thought that changed, you did not. So thank you so much for coming on my podcast. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe so I can get to have more amazing guest speakers on this podcast. And with that being said, hope everybody has a safe and beautiful rest of your day. See you next time.